My brother's wife looked at the judge with tears on command and said, "Your Honor, she lost $40,000 in a single weekend in Vegas. She doesn't even remember it. That's not a person who can run a business. That's a person who needs to be protected from herself." She said it without hesitating. She said it wearing the pearl earrings my father gave her as a welcome to the family gift the Christmas before he died. She had practiced those words. I could tell by the way she breathed through them, slow, even, controlled the way you breathe when you've rehearsed something until it stops feeling like a lie. I sat 8 feet away from her in courtroom 7 of the Fulton County Probate Court in Atlanta, Georgia, and I did not move. I did not react. I kept my hands flat on the table and I looked at her the way you look at a spreadsheet when you're checking for errors with patience, not panic. Because I had been waiting for this exact moment for 7 months. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had someone who smiled at you across a dinner table, called you sister, reached over to fix your hair, and you absolutely knew that the whole time they were calculating how much you were worth? Leave a comment if you know that feeling. I want to know how many of us have sat in that chair. My father built his business from the back of a pickup truck. Holt Climate Solutions, HVAC installation and repair, serving the greater Atlanta metro area for 22 years. He started it when I was 4 years old, running calls in the evenings after his day job at a sheet metal plant, saving until he could afford a second van, then a third. By the time I graduated college, he had 11 employees, 3 service routes, and a commercial contract with 2 mid-size office parks in Buckhead. It wasn't a fortune, but it was his. Every dollar of it came from his hands. He died of a heart attack on a Thursday afternoon in November, 2 years ago, in the parking lot of a hardware store on Peachtree Industrial. He was 57 years old. He was buying a replacement part for a residential job he was still running himself because he said staying in the field kept him honest. The paramedics said it was fast. I choose to believe that. A week after the funeral, I sat in the office of his attorney, a woman named Patricia Owens, and learned that my father had updated his will 14 months before his death. He left the business, the commercial van fleet, and the remaining balance of a $600,000 life insurance policy to me. My brother Daniel received the house, a 4-bedroom in Smyrna that my father had paid off 12 years ago, and a separate savings account earmarked for a down payment on a commercial property. Daniel had been talking about for years. My father had been thoughtful about it. He told Patricia that I was the one who had shown interest in the business, that I had done 2 summers of bookkeeping for him in college, and that he trusted me to carry it the right way. He said Daniel had other plans, and he respected that. What my father did not account for was that Daniel had been married for 3 years to a woman named Vanessa, and Vanessa had very different ideas about what the will should say. I found out about those ideas 8 weeks after the funeral. The first sign was small. Vanessa called me one evening to ask, very casually, whether I had looked into the value of the business. Not how I was doing. Not whether I had eaten. The value of the business. I told her Patricia was handling the estate transfer and changed the subject. She laughed softly and said, of course, no rush." The second sign was less small. My brother pulled me aside at a family dinner in January and told me Vanessa thought it might be worth exploring a buyout arrangement. He used those exact words, buyout arrangement, like he was reading from a memo she had written. I asked him if that was what he wanted. He looked at the floor. I had my answer. The third sign was the one that changed everything. My father's business accountant called me in February to flag some irregularities. 2 invoices had been submitted for reimbursement against the estate account, both charged to the business operating fund before the estate transfer had been finalized. The vendor names didn't match any of my father's usual suppliers. The total was $14,000. When I pulled the invoice documents, the formatting was slightly off, the logo resolution was wrong. The font kerning was a fraction too wide. Small things. Things most people would miss. I did not miss them, because I am not most people. My actual job, not the mid-level bookkeeper Vanessa had apparently described to everyone in our family, is senior analyst at a digital forensics firm called Veridian Consulting in Midtown Atlanta. We work with law firms, insurance companies, and occasionally federal agencies on cases involving document fraud, data manipulation, and financial cybercrime. I had been doing it for 6 years. I had testified as an expert witness 4 times. I had helped build a case that put a CFO in federal prison for 9 years. Vanessa had spent 3 years calling me the numbers girl at holiday dinners, as if I punched receipts into a calculator. She had no idea what I actually did, but I needed more than suspicion. I needed evidence, and I needed it to be airtight, because I already understood what kind of person Vanessa was. She was the kind of person who does not strike until the moment gives her maximum advantage. She would not move against me until she had positioned herself so that any accusation I made looked like instability, not information. So I did something that went against every instinct I had. I waited. I stayed quiet. I attended the family Sunday dinners and let Vanessa refill my water glass, and I smiled at her. I went to Daniel's birthday dinner and watched her make a toast about how much my father would have wanted all of us to stay together as a family. I said nothing. I kept every invoice, every email, every voicemail, every text in a folder that I organized by date and cross-referenced by source. What I was really doing was giving her room to finish. People who are greedy and smart are dangerous. People who are greedy and smart and believe you are not paying attention are something else entirely. They get sloppy. They get confident. They start moving faster than they should. And in the digital world, speed leaves fingerprints everywhere. By April, I had built a record that ran to over 300 pages. The fake invoices traced back to a business entity called Summit Resource Group LLC, registered in Georgia using a nominee filing service. The registered agent address was a commercial mailbox location in Marietta. The beneficial owner on the state's confidential business filing the person who actually controlled the LLC's accounts was Vanessa Lynn Holt, my sister-in-law. Using my maiden name as the business name was either arrogance or laziness. I decided it was both. The LLC had received $14,000 from my father's estate operating account, but it had also received 2 other transfers I hadn't known about. One from my father's personal checking account made 3 days before his death, and one drawn on the business account the day of his funeral. Those transfers totaled another $31,000. The day of funeral transfer had been authorized using my father's online banking credentials from a device that was not his. The IP address of that login traced to a residential address in Smyrna, my brother's home. I kept going. I pulled the full financial record of Summit Resource Group for the 18 months of its existence. The money flowed in, sat for 2 to 4 weeks, then moved in smaller increments to a joint personal account at Regions Bank. The joint account was held by Vanessa and a man named Paul Tremblay, a real estate developer based in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I found a co-signed lease on a vacation rental property in Blue Ridge, Georgia. I found an LLC co-registration for a short-term rental business. I found text records, obtained during discovery, of conversations between Vanessa and Tremblay going back almost 2 years. 2 years. My brother had been married to her for 3. I did not tell Daniel. I know how that sounds. But I had watched Vanessa work my family for months, and I understood her skill set. If Daniel knew what I knew before the time was right, one of 2 things would happen. He would confront her, and she would destroy the evidence and adjust her story. Or he would protect her, and I would lose my only advantage. Either way, telling him early cost me everything and gained me nothing. So I kept going. Then, in May, Vanessa made her move. She filed a petition for conservatorship over my father's estate and the business assets, claiming I was mentally unfit to manage an inheritance. She claimed I had a gambling problem, specifically that I had lost $40,000 at a casino in Las Vegas during a work conference in March. She claimed I had erratic behavior, missed family obligations, and showed signs of what she described as severe financial impulsivity and executive dysfunction. She attached a psychiatric evaluation. It was signed by a Dr. Yusuf Hakim, a licensed psychiatrist with a practice in Decatur. The evaluation was 4 pages long. It described me as showing signs of an impulse control disorder and moderate cognitive dysregulation. It included what appeared to be clinical observations and standardized test scores. Dr. Yusuf Hakim had never met me. He had never called me. He had never sent me a single intake form. I had never been within the same building as this man. The evaluation had been written based entirely on what Vanessa had told him over the course of 2 conversations, 1 phone call and 1 dinner. I know this because I checked. I also know where the dinner was because Paul Tremblay had shared a photo on a private Instagram account that a colleague of mine had already screenshotted during a separate review of Tremblay's social media presence. Dr. Hakim was Tremblay's cousin. He had been at the dinner not as a clinician but as a guest. He had written a psychiatric diagnosis of a patient he had never examined based on the account of the woman who was robbing her, and then he had submitted it to a probate court as legitimate clinical documentation. I printed the Instagram photo and added it to the yellow tab. That was the part I was saving for last. The morning of the hearing, I wore a gray blazer and low heels. I arrived 20 minutes early. I put my binder on the table. It was navy blue, 2 inches thick, tabbed with 5 colors. I set a bottle of water beside it and I waited. Vanessa came in with her attorney. a man named Glenn Wicker who had the kind of professional confidence that comes from never having been genuinely surprised in a courtroom. Daniel sat in the gallery, 2 rows back. He did not look at me when he came in. Vanessa had told him I later learned that I had asked the estate attorney to freeze his inheritance pending a separate review. That was not true, but she had told him it was, and Daniel believed her because he wanted to believe she was protecting him. My aunt, my father's sister Carol, was in the gallery too. She had driven from Macon. She thought she was there to support the family. She had no idea which side she was actually on yet. The judge was a woman named the Honorable Bernadette Cole, mid-50s, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, the kind of face that has heard every variation of every story and is still willing to listen to one more. She reviewed the petition summary, then looked at me. "Miss Holt," she said, "you've been served with a conservatorship petition alleging significant concerns about your capacity to manage the estate assets. How do you respond?" I stood up. I took exactly 1 breath, and I looked directly at Vanessa before I turned to the judge. "Your Honor," I said, "I'd like to respond to the evidence my sister-in-law submitted. But first I want to note that she submitted it while under oath. That matters for what I'm about to show you." Glenn Wicker shifted in his chair. Vanessa did not move. She had a slight smile, the practiced, sympathetic expression of someone who is prepared for an emotional outburst and is ready to look sad about it. She was not prepared for what I was about to do. I opened the binder to the red tab. These are bank records for Summit Resource Group, LLC, a company registered in Georgia 8 months before my father's death. I placed a copy in front of the judge. This company received $14,000 from my father's estate operating account through fraudulent invoice submissions, $31,000 from my father's personal and business accounts in the 48 hours surrounding his death, and has conducted a total of $74,000 in transfers since its founding. Every dollar that entered this account came from my father's financial holdings. The gallery was quiet. Glenn started to rise. I turned to the green tab. The beneficial owner of Summit Resource Group, per Georgia Secretary of State confidential business filing, is Vanessa Lynn Holt. I set the document on the table facing the bench. The woman who just told this court she was petitioning to protect my father's estate from me. Judge Cole picked up the document. She did not say anything yet. Vanessa's smile didn't fall, but her jaw tightened, just slightly, at the hinge. Glenn was on his feet. "Your Honor, these documents haven't been introduced through proper evidentiary channels, and the respondent is making very serious—" "Mr. Wicker," Judge Cole said, without looking up from the page, "sit down." He sat down. I opened the blue tab. "These are IP logs from my father's online banking portal," I said. The login that authorized the $19,000 transfer on the day of his funeral made, while his body was still at the funeral home, originated from a device connected to the home network at 441 Birchwood, Trace in Smyrna, Georgia. That is the address of my brother Daniel and his wife Vanessa. I paused. My father was not at that address. He was never at that address after his cardiac event. This login was made by someone else using his saved credentials. I heard my brother make a sound behind me. Not words, just a sound, low and involuntary, like something coming loose. "These are text message records," I continued, moving to the second blue section, obtained through formal legal discovery, between my sister-in-law and a man named Paul Tremblay, a real estate developer based in Chattanooga. The messages spanned 22 months. They referenced the estate planning, my father's life insurance policy, and in messages dated 3 weeks before my father's death, a specific reference to timing. I'll ask the court to review page 47, where my sister-in-law writes, and I quote, "Once the transfer is done, Glenn handles the rest. Just need her to look unstable for 60 days. The gallery erupted. Aunt Carol put her hand over her mouth. Glenn shot to his feet again. "Objection. Hearsay. Foundation. That message is completely out of context. It is a text message sent from my sister-in-law's registered phone number to Paul Tremblay's registered phone number," I said, still facing the judge. "The metadata is in the binder. The chain of custody documentation is on the last page of that tab. Discovery was conducted by Viridian Consulting, where I am employed as a senior digital forensic analyst. I am a certified forensic examiner with 6 years of field experience and 4 prior instances of expert testimony in Georgia courts." The room changed. I felt it the way you feel a shift in pressure before a storm. Glenn sat back down slowly. Vanessa turned to him. He did not look back at her. I turned to the yellow tab. "Dr. Yusuf Hakim submitted a psychiatric evaluation of me to this court as part of the conservatorship petition," I said. "The evaluation is dated April 28th. It contains clinical observations, standardized assessment scores, and a diagnostic conclusion. I would like to point out that I have never met Dr. Hakim. I have never spoken with him on the phone. I have never submitted to any examination, assessment, or intake procedure of any kind. I placed a document in front of the judge. This is a sworn affidavit from the receptionist at Dr. Hakim's practice confirming that no appointment, intake form, or patient record exists in my name in their system. This is a declaration from Dr. Hakim's billing coordinator confirming that no insurance claim or self-pay record has ever been filed under my name or social security number. I placed a second document beside it, and this is a photograph taken at a private dinner in Chattanooga on April 4th, 3 weeks before the evaluation was signed, showing Dr. Hakim, Paul Tremblay, and my sister-in-law seated together at the same table. Dr. Hakim is Paul Tremblay's first cousin. The photograph was posted to a private Instagram account and preserved through a standard social media archiving protocol. I looked at Judge Cole directly. Dr. Hakim wrote a clinical psychiatric evaluation of a woman he had never examined based on what her accuser told him at a dinner and submitted it to this court as sworn expert documentation. That is not a clinical error, Your Honor. Under Georgia Code 161020, that is false statements and writings to a court. Under Georgia's medical practice statutes, it is grounds for immediate license revocation. Vanessa stood up. I had not expected that. Glenn grabbed her arm, but she was already talking. She is making all of this up, she said, her voice hard and bright with the sharpness of someone who has just run out of patience for her own performance. She's been building this case against me for months because she cannot stand that Daniel and I exist. She has always resented us. She has always been. Mrs. Holt, Judge Cole said. Vanessa kept going. She works with lawyers. She knows how to fabricate evidence. She does this for a living. Mrs. Holt. The judge's voice didn't rise. It did not need to. Vanessa stopped. Judge Cole set her glasses on the bench in front of her. She looked at Vanessa for a long moment without speaking. Then she looked at Glenn. Then she looked back at me. Miss Holt, she said, using my name with the kind of precision that signals a decision has been made. Are there additional documents in that binder? One more tab, Your Honor. Continue. I opened the final section, the orange tab, which I had added only 2 weeks before the hearing when the last piece had come together. My sister-in-law's petition includes a letter allegedly written by my father 14 months before his death, I said. The letter states that he expressed a verbal wish to revise his estate distribution in favor of the family unit, meaning my brother and his wife, and that this wish was never formally executed due to his declining health. The letter is submitted as supporting context for why conservatorship was in my father's spirit, if not his will. I placed the document in front of the judge. I had that letter examined by a certified forensic document examiner, Margaret T.C., whose credentials and prior court appearances are listed in the binder. The examination found that the paper the letter is printed on was manufactured no earlier than 8 months ago. My father died 24 months ago. The letter could not have been printed while my father was alive. Glenn was not on his feet this time. He was staring at the table. The metadata embedded in the letter's PDF shows the file was created on a MacBook Pro registered to Vanessa Holt's Apple ID on a date 6 weeks after my father's funeral. The document was generated using a word processing template and printed on paper purchased, per credit card records I subpoenaed, at an office supply store in Vinings, Georgia, a store 3 miles from my brother and sister-in-law's home. I closed the binder. That letter is a forgery submitted to this court as supporting documentation in a fraudulent conservatorship petition. My sister-in-law has stolen more than $74,000 from my father's estate, fabricated a psychiatric evaluation, obtained a false clinical diagnosis through a personal connection, and forged a document bearing my dead father's name. I paused. And she did all of it while calling herself his daughter-in-law. The courtroom was completely silent. Vanessa turned to Glenn and said something in a low, fast voice that I could not hear. He shook his head once. She said something else. He closed his folder and did not respond. Judge Cole took a long breath. She picked up her glasses and put them back on. This court finds no basis for the conservatorship petition, she said. The petition is denied with prejudice. Furthermore, this court is referring the matter of the forged document and the fraudulent psychiatric submission to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office for criminal review. She looked at Glenn. Mr. Wicker, you may want to consult with your own counsel before your next appearance. She paused. And I will be issuing a referral to the Georgia Composite Medical Board regarding Dr. Hakim. A practitioner who submits fraudulent clinical evaluations to probate courts is not a matter I take lightly. She looked at Vanessa one more time. Miss Holt, the petitioner, I strongly recommend you retain separate criminal counsel before close of business today. She closed the file. I sat down. My hands were in my lap. They were steady. Behind me, I heard my brother's chair scrape back. Daniel found me in the hallway outside the courtroom. He looked the way people look when something they thought was load-bearing has been removed, like the whole structure of what he believed is suddenly uncertain. He was pale. His eyes were red at the corners. I didn't know, he said. It came out flat, because he was still in shock and there wasn't room for anything else yet. I know, I said. How long have you known? 7 months. He was quiet for a moment. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at him, my brother, who had watched me sit through Sunday dinners while his wife refilled my water glass and talked about what our father would have wanted. My brother, who had come to this courthouse believing I was unstable because the person sleeping next to him had spent months making sure he believed it. Because she would have adjusted, I said. She needed to feel like she was winning. That was the only way to make sure she went far enough to be caught. He didn't say anything for a long time. Aunt Carol came out of the courtroom and stopped when she saw us standing there. She looked at Daniel, then at me. Then she walked over and put both arms around me without saying a word, and she held on. The case moved through the criminal system over the following 10 months. Vanessa was indicted on 5 counts: theft by taking, forgery in the first degree, making false statements to a government body, financial identity fraud, and criminal conspiracy. Paul Tremblay was named as a co-defendant on the conspiracy count and the theft charges. He had received $44,000 from the Summit Resource Group account and co-signed on the Blue Ridge vacation rental funded with my father's money. Dr. Yusuf Hakim was not criminally indicted. The DA determined there was insufficient evidence that he knew the evaluation would be submitted to court rather than used informally. But the Georgia Composite Medical Board opened an investigation, and within 4 months, his license was suspended pending a full ethics review. His practice closed. His patients were transferred. The suspension was covered briefly in the Atlanta Business Chronicle under a headline about fraudulent expert testimony in probate cases, and that was the last I heard of him professionally. Glenn Wicker was not charged, but was referred to the state bar for a disciplinary hearing on questions of what he knew and when. I do not know the outcome of that hearing. I know that his name no longer appears on the website of his former firm. Vanessa took a plea deal to avoid trial. She received 4 years, with the possibility of parole after 18 months, and was ordered to pay full restitution on the $74,000 plus interest. The Blue Ridge property was seized. The region's bank account was frozen. Tremblay entered a separate guilty plea and received 2 years of supervised probation and $30,000 in restitution. My brother did not testify against his wife. He was not asked to. The DA determined he had no material involvement in the fraud. He had been managed, the same way I had been managed, with selective information and manufactured evidence. He married a skilled one. We have had exactly 3 conversations since the hearing. They were not easy conversations. There is a particular kind of grief in realizing that the person you trusted most in your household was using you as a tool, and Daniel was still moving through that grief the last time we spoke. I do not push. I told him the door is open when he's ready, and I meant it. I run the business now, Holt Climate Solutions. We have 14 employees. I hired 3 new technicians over the summer to cover the residential growth in the Alpharetta corridor, and I just signed a second commercial contract with an office campus in Sandy Springs. My father would have appreciated the math. I appreciate it for him. I also did something else. I found out that Dr. Hakim had submitted similar informal evaluations in 2 other cases, both involving estate disputes, both at the request of parties later found to have financial interests in the outcome. I turned that information over to the medical board investigator and to an attorney who works in elder financial abuse cases. She told me it was useful. I hope it was. My therapist told me I should talk about the fear. Not the competence. Everyone focuses on the competence, the binder, the forensics, the preparation, but the fear. Because for 7 months I woke up at 3 in the morning with my heart going fast and my mind running the scenario where it wasn't enough. Where Vanessa had found the documents, where the judge didn't look at the metadata, where Daniel got on the stand and said something that undid everything. I ran that scenario more times than I can count. I was not fearless. I was afraid every single day, and I kept going anyway, because being afraid was not a good enough reason to let someone take what my father built with his hands in the back of a pickup truck on the night shifts when I was 4 years old. Some things are worth more than your fear. You have to decide what those things are for yourself. What I want to say to the person who is sitting right now at a kitchen table with a stack of documents they don't know what to do with, wondering if they sound paranoid, wondering if anyone will believe them, wondering if the effort is worth it. Yes, it is worth it. Not because it's guaranteed to work, but because the alternative is deciding that the people who counted on you don't deserve your best effort. My father's name is still on those vans. I made sure of that. I am still running routes he mapped and serving customers he kept for 20 years. And every morning when I check the schedule, I feel him in it. Some people count on your grief to make you slow. They count on your love to make you soft. They count on your trust to make you blind. Don't let them. Document everything. Tell no one before it's time. And when the moment comes, walk in with your binder and your steady hands and show them exactly who they underestimated. Have you ever had to fight for something that was already yours? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your story. And if this reached someone who needed it, share it. You never know who's sitting at that table tonight.